and welcome to another edition of the One Hood Power Hour. I am your host, Nicole Jones, and we're so happy and thankful that you are here with us this evening. We are going to continue on our conversation as we talk about housing. We know that housing continues to be a top of the line pressing issue for so many here in Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania, just because of how rapidly the housing market has changed within the past couple of years. Whether you're owning or renting, housing is a top of the line issue. We know here in Pennsylvania, um, just like the rest of the nation, there are people who have to work full time jobs. There is actually right now in Pennsylvania no full time job that will allow you to work the minimum wage and afford rent in Pennsylvania. And so when we're talking about building affordability, building affordable housing, creating homes, creating places where people are able to build and develop, there's all types of conversations that go into creating housing. But what does it mean to actually have housing? What does it mean to have fair housing? What does it mean to have housing that is safe and housing that's in good condition? These are conversations that we are wrestling with here in Pittsburgh, particularly with a lot of our rental development properties. We know that there's an ongoing battle in the courts about the rental registry. And so there's so many things that are impacting the way people have access to housing. So to continue on our conversation about housing and what you can do to fight for housing access and equity right here in Pennsylvania, we're going to have a conversation with two individuals who are organizing here in the Pittsburgh area to fight for a better housing access and equity. We're going to tell their stories. We hope that you're able to get involved and feel motivated to find ways that you're able to advocate within your own communities for housing and better housing access and conditions. Our first guest we want to welcome to the One Hood Power Hour is a tenant and an organizer, a rental tenant and an organizer with One Pennsylvania, who has for the past couple of years been really focused on making sure that people who are in government housing have the housing supports that they need and improved housing conditions. So welcome to the program, Cathy.
Hello.
Hi, and thank you so much for joining us on this Tuesday evening. We're so very thankful and grateful that you're here. Can you just talk a little bit about how you got involved in One Pennsylvania and the tenant organizing that you all do?
One
One
after
PA.
yes, I one afternoon, a woman came into the building and they were canvassing for voting, and they were talking about rental properties, and she took my number, and I thought no more about it, and I ended up getting a call invited to a meeting over in the waterfront. And from that day to now, I've been involved with one PA.
Yes, and you said you got a call to involve in the meeting. Can you just talk a little bit about that rental meeting and what are some of the issues that are you're trying to address as you're organizing with your fellow renters?
Well, that first meeting, I met with other renters from different properties from over here on. I'm in Oakland, just a little below the hill, and I met a few women from one of the other rental properties that was going through. They were having issues, and there was other people there from Monview Heights, and it started out a large group, but it's dwindled down. We still have a pretty good bit, but there was a lot of people from Monview where they're having a lot of problems, and now there's a lot of problems up on the hill, and so we're trying to get more people involved.
Thank you. That and you're saying like problems. What kind of you told me these properties? These are living
Well, I live
places.
in Belfield Dwellings, which is on Center Avenue between Death Ridge and Belfield. And at the time when I got involved, we were having issues with bed bugs, uh, no security. Uh, that was the biggest issues was the bed bugs and no security. Well, the bed bugs have since been eradicated, but we no longer that we still don't have any security because I don't. They didn't want to pay the security, and according to HUD regulations, it's not something that's mandated for them to have. So, needless to say, we eradicated the bed bugs and got small issues under control, but we still no longer have security here. But my uh, fellow tenants and neighbors, and there's other areas up on, like I said, up on the hill, they're battling with raw sewage coming up in their basements. Something that I seen for myself, not something that I heard. Ceilings falling in, mold, uh, rodent infestation. And then I visited a woman in Palisades, and they were experiencing the same thing in her building. Something that I witnessed, not something that she told me. She took me to see. The raw sewage and stuff was coming up through the pipes, and you could smell it in the hallway. And they were battling ro- uh, rodents, roaches, and bed bugs.
Okay, so you talked about these are like HUD properties. There are regulations about like safety and cleanliness that these facilities are failing to adhere meet to. You said you got tenants have invited you to come and see, some of the apartments, and there's mold, there's bed bugs, there's rodents. We've There's been reports of rodents being in people's walls. Outside of the people you've been able to directly see, what are some of the other complaints that you've heard that about the living conditions that people are facing right now on some of these properties?
Uh, a lot of issues that I've heard. They got raccoons. I've seen raccoons on people's cupboards. Um, they don't have proper walkways to walk on. They're walking on plywood to get into their apartments. Some of the apartments are empty and they got squatters.
Hmm. And so people are saying there are structural issues with some of these properties, and then there are actual rodents, and so you can't have food if you have rodents. You can't be able to use the facilities if the sewage is like coming back up. And so people really just aren't able to live safely in their dwellings. And so you have talked about, just luckily at your facility, you've been able to get rid of the bed bugs. But what have you seen as the tenants have come together and shared some of the stories? What are some of the hopes that folks have to address some of these issues?
Well, I know for our building, the hope is that they get some security in there and perhaps some extra cameras. That's for Belfield dwellings. I know for the other properties, the hope is to be able to live in cleanliness and to be able to bring their children up properly where they can sit down and have a decent meal at the table, where they're able to get up the next day and go to school without having to worry about whether they're going to come home and have to cross the path of a road. And some of the places also are missing the railings coming from the second floor to the first floor, where a couple of the children, the one child fell down the steps. And another incident was where the mold had overtaken them, and both her and her mother had to go to the hospital a couple times. What I would like to see happen is that these people are able to live in a clean and comfortable environment without having to run back and forth to the hospital, and where they and Also, there's been times where the people was without water. The young lady that was supposed to be on, that I'm taking her place, she was in her house without water and no heat. I mean, no electricity for 30 something days in July. So I just like to see these people just treat people like they're human, and as opposed to allowing them to feel like that they're inhuman and they're hopeless. I would like to see that people's spirits get picked back up because of these people are concerned with the way that they're living, as opposed to keep looking at it like it's a dollar. They making $1, but you're getting paid from HUD, but you're not putting the money back into the properties. I'd like to see that money go back into the properties.
Okay, and so just for people who are joining us, we're talking with Cathy, who is a tenant, and she's talking about some of the issues that are facing people who are living in some of these facilities and apartments that are being supported by HUD. If you're just joining us, she talks about some of the apartments do not have electricity, do not have running water. There's rat infestations, raccoon infestations, issues of mold. There's issues of railings. There's issues of safety. So there is structural damage. And as a result of this, people are not able to bathe. People are not able to shower in their homes. People can't even have meals or even food within their homes because of the rodent infestation. And so because these management companies who are tasked with managing these properties, who are getting subsidies from HUD, are failing to provide fair and safe housing. Some of the tenants are getting together to organize and make demands. And so I do know that when you talked about some of these issues with One Pennsylvania, there have been some actions that y'all have had. You've had town halls. You recently had a protest in the Homewood area. Can you just talk a little bit about what led to that action in Homewood and what are some of those demands that y'all were lifting up there?
Well, since what led to the action was you couldn't get the attention on some of these properties, especially Kelly Hamilton properties, of management. And what led to that is that there was a letter written to the management company and the receiver on these properties, because all of them are up for foreclosure, and tried to get to have a conversation with the management company and the receiver. And it was like that they act like they never received the letter, and so that led to the action that took place on Kelly Hamilton. You figure if we would go to their management office and try to get the management to make the call, which they didn't, and said, so they said the numbers there you can call, or you can email and what have you. So these people, these management on site, the property manager on site, was very rude. She didn't. She commented on that the properties didn't get like this, and this happened before they got it, and they're working on it and stuff like that. Well, these people aren't um, seeing that happen, and some of the demands were that they wanted to meet and organize with they wanted to meet with the tenants. They wanted them tenants to meet with them, Tri Guild and Lynn, to meet with the organize for safe and livable housing, make needed repairs by a licensed professional, distribute these. Some of these people get a utility check, some type of subsidy utility check, something that I don't receive, and they wanted the demands were about their checks being delivered, um, and also they weren't being doing the certifications properly, or they weren't being done at all. So some of the people, they were charging them fair market rent when they never did a recertification. So they wanted to be the recertification that be taken done, and to wipe out all this debt that they're saying these people owe, when it was clearly their fault. It's something that they didn't do. Those are the demands, and they wanted, housing recertification and lease renewals. That's the demands.
And so people are still waiting to hear back, from management. And so I think a lot of times people assume that when folks are on Section 8 or they're getting subsidies, that the housing is good, right? That the living conditions are good. You expect that like people have electricity and running water. And so we're talking about like right here in Pittsburgh, there are people who are living with conditions of bed bugs, of rats, and rodent infestations simply because the management properties have failed in their duties to upkeep these properties. And so I know you said that the management companies have not been able to, like, people have not been able to sit down. But if you were able to sit down with one of these managers from these management companies, what would you tell them?
I would ask, my question to be to them is, how would you like living like this? Does your mother, as a senior, do she live like like these people, like people are living? Um, and when can we see some results? When can we see uh, some results from the money that's being taken in from HUD that should be used for necessary repairs, making it safe and affordable, safe and clean? That's what I would say, and ask them, you know, would you like living like that?
And so, what if you could, wave a magic wand and create healthy, clean, affordable housing? What would that look like to you? If you could, design your own housing program, what would it look like?
Well, for me, uh, you're talking to someone that worked with homeless women and children, managed a program. So for me, I would put, once these properties was taken care of and put back into livable and habitable, I would interject some life skills into the program to ensure that the properties stay the way that they take care of them and bring them back up to code and up to par. Um, I, I could go on and on about that situation there, but I just would like to see the people can be happy and live in a clean environment. I don't live like that, so to see it is horrifying for me. I must say, I don't live like that. My buildings like that, and so I want to stick with the fight because I'm comfortable. You understand? I live comfortable and always have, so I don't understand none of it. But I'm fighting to try to eradicate and make it better. I would like to see better for people.
Yeah, I think that's like really, really important to understand that like it does not have to be this way. There are some management companies that do right by their people, that have, housing that's up to code, that has, a management that cares. And so when you see these management companies that are failing and abusing people and taking advantage of people, it's wrong because you get to see what's right, and your company that's doing like right by you, that's,
Well, now let's stop there,
okay.
because I have the same management company that these other people have. So it's just that the building was the prior president's father's. baby. He owned this place. So it was always, basically up to par. Like I said, except for like the infestation of the bed bugs and stuff like that. But I still am a tenant under Lynn Management and Tri-Guild as the receiver. It's just that Bellfield's just not where I've seen a lot of these properties. Okay. And I don't understand why they're not working towards trying to do better with these properties as they do the Belfield.
So they have a standard that they can meet if they are failing to meet. And so for anybody who wants to get involved and who wants to support you all as you're doing like your tenant organizing, how can they reach out to you all? Do you have any events coming up that they can be a part of?
We have a town, well, no, we're going to have a renters rights clinic soon. We're working on that and working on because home of Kelly Hamilton has been purchased by Lynn Management. So we're trying to organize because they had so many days to meet with with the tenants from Kelly Hamilton. So we're trying to organize and get that in place. So those are the two events that we're planning right now.
Mhm. And so, how can people get in contact with like One Pennsylvania to follow up and just like be in support of you all?
They could go to linktree.com, Renters United Allegheny, or they can email Matt at 1pa.org.
All right, Miss Cathy, I do thank you so much for taking a little bit of your Tuesday to sit down and talk with us. Before we let you go, is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, yeah. As you all watch this, I would like to say that it could be you, and we need all the support. It don't have to just be tenants under Lynn Management because it's going on all around the city. It's not just involving Lynn Management and former ARCO properties. It's other places. But if we fight, we can accomplish and get things done. But we have to stick together, and we need all the support that we can get.
All right, Miss Cathy, thank you so very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
You as well. Thank you for having me.
And so, as we're having these conversations around housing, I think it's very important to talk to people who are being directly impacted by this housing market. There's so many different forms of housing. You hear people talk about market rate, Section 8, renters, homeowners, everybody is being impacted by this current housing crisis, whether people are being pushed out, priced out, or even people who have housing. This is the fact that it's not being ran properly is creating issues. And we know just the other week, there was the unfortunate fire in Squirrel Hill that displaced a number of people. And so people are from all walks of life, all socioeconomic backgrounds, are being impacted by the housing crisis. And our next guest has been organizing and working to make sure that everyone who's impacted by housing has a seat at the table and is educated to know what's going on and how their city and county officials can address and push back against some of the things that we're seeing happen in the housing market, while also protecting renters and people who are trying to make housing more affordable within Allegheny County and here in Pennsylvania. And so we want to welcome our next guest to the 100 Power Hour. Maddie, welcome to the Power Hour.
Hey, Miracle. Thanks for having me here today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know it's been a very busy couple of weeks
Definitely.
for you, so I'm so thankful that you're here and joining us. And so, can you just talk a little bit about some of the work that you have been doing these past couple of weeks and why it's so important for us to be really paying attention to the way housing is going right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just first of all, I'm an organizer with the Global Switchboard and the Pittsburgh Housing Justice Table. Um, And I've been involved in really housing advocacy for a number of years now. My background was as a social worker, which is what brought me to the table, realizing that we really need to focus on policy change if we're going to improve conditions for people here in the city. We have to move beyond some of the other ways of addressing the crisis that aren't really resulting in the transformative change that we need. And I want to just acknowledge Cathy's story. I think that's so powerful and awful, what she's had to experience. No one should have to experience that anywhere, and definitely not in our city. And the fact that those calls for accountability have been ignored for years is just completely unacceptable. But to answer your question, the housing justice table over the past few weeks has been locked in really with our campaign to help pass what's called the Housing Needs Assessment Zoning Package, which is a set of policies that would help to create more affordable housing in Pittsburgh. And one of the most controversial aspects of that policy has been inclusionary zoning. Um, and I can say as much or as little about inclusionary zoning as we want to get into tonight. Do you have any particular questions about it?
Yeah, we can talk to a little bit and just I want to get to inclusionary zone in just a little bit. But before we get there, can you just talk a little bit about, you listen to the Cathy story, but can you just talk a little bit about some of the other stories that you have heard within like Pittsburgh and some of the changes that have happened with like just the housing crisis, like here in just like the past year?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, housing costs are going up and wages are not keeping pace. And the housing crisis definitely worsened with the pandemic, but actually was escalating before that. And we're seeing a lot of certainly federal disinvestment from not only funding for housing resources and support to keep housing affordable and healthy, but also, disinvestment from the idea that housing is a human right. Um, and sorry, could you repeat the question?
Mm-hmm. And so, just like we're talking about like the rapid change, like in the housing crisis, like here in Pittsburgh. You mentioned, the pandemic. There's been just like a lot of issues with affordability and the increase in in rental costs. And so, when we're talking like about affordability, why is it so important that we really talk about creating different policies that allow Pittsburgh to stay home for like so many people?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do think the prevailing system, right, is one that has a clear set of values, that views housing as a commodity to make profit, and that values property rights over human rights. And we heard that in Cathy's story, where the owners of this property are taking money, including public, and federal tax dollars, to make a profit, and not even carrying out like the basic duties of taking care of the people who live there. Roofs falling in, sewage coming out of the ground, people not getting their utility checks to be able to pay their bills. We're not talking about, people don't have luxury housing. We're talking about basic needs, and everybody has the right, to have healthy, safe, stable, accessible housing. And so the fight that we're undergoing is really between those two visions, right? The status quo, which is decades of disinvestment from public and social housing, property rights over human rights, and viewing housing as something to make money rather than creating homes for people to live in and to go to work, to go to school, to access healthcare, to go to the grocery store. And on the other side, of housing justice and our movement, and why it's so important that, we're having these conversations and hearing Cathy's story, which is not, she's not the only one experiencing this, but that housing is is a basic human need and a human right, and that every single person in our city, in our county, and the nation should be able to count on having stable housing. And we should be having policies that actually put people over profit. And part of the reason that situations like the former NB affordable properties and the former ARCO properties are so bad, is because of those decades of exclusionary policies that treated housing as a way to make money, and then you have these horrible situations. So that's what's really at stake is, having livable communities, having a stable society, and really having a city where people are treated as human beings and can meet their basic needs.
I think about the city council hearings and just like the last like year and a half of like organizing. Were you shocked that so many people, like there was like so much money that's being invested in keeping like the status quo going? And there are like people who are like, housing could be a human right, but like Pittsburgh, it may not be the place where like housing should be. Because I think about, we talk about the MB affordable properties and now they're under receivership. We talk about, we've gone viral so many times here in Pittsburgh, whether it's houses, being falling apart, whether it's houses, rooftops collapsing during parties, whether it's, people, catching fire, whether it is rats and rodents. There's so many things that have happened with like the housing market here. And yet there is such a like entrenched resistance to creating affordability and to making sure that housing becomes a human right. Was that something that like shocked you, like as you're like organizing and coming from like a social work background?
I wish I could say it shocked me, but really not at all. I think it's good to have these conversations and be clear about the values behind sort of the different sides of this, right? Where I think it can be hard to believe or accept that there are people out there who don't view housing as a human right, who don't think that people should have a right to housing, and who don't care that people are living in substandard housing or living in fear of how they're going to pay rent, or sacrificing, food in order to pay for housing. Certainly, like, you and I would say we don't think anyone should be in that position because we're coming from that the value set of human rights. But I think it's important to be clear that we have an opposition who does not want to see human rights take precedence when policies are being made, who are not willing to compromise on their profit. And that's where unfortunately power matters greatly when compromise isn't possible or desirable. I mean, we're not going to compromise on human rights, but the other side is not willing to compromise on profit. And we heard from Cathy, where that gets us is terrible. So we have to really build our power to be able to contend with the opposition. And I think pointing out the money going into opposing even like modest policies that help to improve housing shows why that's so important for us to like build our power.
And so we talked about with Cathy, but we also know that this year is like the 10th year anniversary of the Penn Plaza, displacement. And so what are some of the takeaways that we should be holding as we're really reflecting on this past 10 years of like massive, displacement that's been happening throughout like the city of Pittsburgh? What are some of the things that we should be thinking about? And what are some of the takeaways that we should be fighting for to make sure there's not another Penn Plaza?
Yeah. Oh, wow. There's so much to say about that. And thanks for thinking of Penn Plaza. On an aside, the fight against the Penn Plaza displacement was really my first entry point into community organizing around housing in Pittsburgh. And I think, we can all see that, unfortunately, the Penn Plaza apartment buildings are no longer there. And that was a really difficult and bitter fight. And what we learned from that, I think, is sort of twofold, which is that we absolutely need better policies, and we need more city leadership to protect housing as a human right in Pittsburgh. And I think the plight of Penn Plaza, the displacement of the residents there, really showed that we did not have an accountability and structure in place, and we did not have policies in place to protect residents, including like long-term residents, people who have lived there for decades, were displaced so that a developer could make a profit. So that became clear, I think, that we have work to do to improve protections for tenants and actually ensure that human rights take precedent over profit. But I also think that, there were some positives to that fight. Like I said, like that was sort of my entry point into organizing around housing. And I think that the residents and the organizers that really championed that fight, I think shed a light on that we kind of have a tale of two cities here. Not kind of, we do. And that's a fact, that we live in a city that's called the most livable city, and yet Black residents and low-income residents are being displaced by the thousands. But some new leaders, I think, really emerged from that fight, and it really launched actually the Housing Justice Table and the Housing Opportunity Fund. So even though, we weren't able to stop Penn Plaza from being demolished, we were able to get some wins for renters and residents in Pittsburgh, and to really launch a campaign to continue the fight for affordable housing.
Thank you. And I think that it's really important to remind people, like, even when you lose, there are still positive takeaways that you are able to hold on to. And I always love hearing how Randall talks about how the Penn Plaza community still to this day is organizing and holding each other and talking to each other. And I think that's like really, really important. And you talked a little bit earlier, so I guess we can go ahead and get into it about having these policies, right? It's really important to have policies that create affordability and allow people to like stay and not have, to be displaced, right? Because this idea that like development does not require displacement. Like you can build and you can create and you can have new shiny things without having to push people out or pretend that working class people do not exist. And so can you just talk a little bit about like last week, what happened at the city council hearing, and what are some of the next steps as we have this, ongoing conversation around inclusionary zoning and development within the city of Pittsburgh?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I focus so much on policy, right? Because I moved from, I told you, as a social worker, working with folks who were experiencing housing insecurity and trying to, assist people to find housing, and realizing there isn't enough housing. There's not housing that is, I should say, affordable to people making below a certain income. And in order, and that's the market, that the market as it stands created that problem, right? So what you have is like developers and landlords and property managers aren't providing the housing that our city needs. And so we need policies to essentially correct the market and make it work for the people, and have a city that, have policies that work for the people of the city, and not have us work for, developers so that they can make more money. And there's a lot, that could be said about inclusionary zoning. But what I really want to highlight, which I think, Miracle, you have highlighted, so well, and I really thank you for your advocacy around this, is that inclusionary zoning is a policy that can help to actually, it's not going to completely accomplish this, but it can actually help to reverse and remedy decades of exclusionary policies that have, existed in our city and around the country for decades. So really, that's how I like to frame the conversation around IZ, is that this is a reasonable policy that has been developed for Pittsburgh over a very long period of time. Actually, it was recommended about 10 years ago by the Affordable Housing Task Force. And it's a tool that can facilitate more mixed income and diverse neighborhoods. So that's what Wednesday's hearing was about. Was we won a positive recommendation for this legislation in January from the City Planning Commission, and now it's before City Council, and there are legislators. And Wednesday was about calling on them to pass this policy for Pittsburgh, pass this policy to create more affordable housing and to create opportunities for everyone in every city neighborhood. And the turnout was amazing. We absolutely had more people show up in favor of inclusionary zoning than against it. So I think that's definitely a hopeful moment, but it's not over yet. So in terms of next steps, the vote has not happened yet on this policy, even though there's great momentum and support for it. There's still, we're still in the opportunity window where this could pass or not, and that's an opportunity for folks, in terms of an action step, to like reach out to City Council and say, we want inclusionary zoning. We want policies that put people over profit.
And it's like so important. And we know that there is a legacy, and we haven't really gotten to it. It hasn't really been brought up and discussed a lot, in the past, like, at these council hearings. But there has been a legacy, literally since the Negro Removal Project, in the 50s and 60s in Pittsburgh, to really displace and push out Black residents. And we know that there are over 10,000 Black residents that have been pushed out of the city of Pittsburgh. We know that a lot of these developers are trying to, when they do their own affordable housing, it's set at 4 times the income level of Black residents, right? So a lot of times to get into a property, you got to show your last month's rent, and that you're making 3 times, the salary. But now there is a policy that is set to intentionally make sure that Black people are rent burdened, so they're not in a lot of these neighborhoods. And when you have these conversations, people admit that they are not building and designing, properties for Black folks, right? And so there's also this racial element that is underlining this whole entire conversation that people do not feel comfortable addressing. And so you've been very, intentional about uplifting the fact that, like, inclusionary zoning is a culturally necessary policy to make sure that we are not creating de facto segregation. Why was it so important for you to make sure that, like, that point was heard, and to as you're like having these conversations, to educate people about, like, the racial component to the housing crisis?
Yeah. Well, I think on a values level, and certainly speaking for myself and the table, like, I truly believe that every single person deserves, not deserves, that has human rights, including a right to, healthy housing, and that, is not something that is given by the government or by a landlord. Like, that is part of our human dignity. And having seen, both as a social worker and, through my involvement with this coalition, how people are being treated in this city, in particular Black residents, it should appall anybody with a conscience. And I feel, compelled to do something about it. And to, certainly, if I can, use my privilege as a white person to advocate for residents in our city who are vulnerable, and that includes, not only Black residents, but our immigrant neighbors, people with disabilities, transit riders, our LGBTQ and our trans community members. So many folks are under attack, certainly in this political moment. But yeah, it comes back to human rights and social justice and equity, and that um, I think we need to make clear that that's what this is about, because the opponents to affordable housing are not going to frame it that way, right? They're not going to come out and say, I'm promoting racism or I'm promoting discrimination against low income people. But we can look at the impact of those policies and see that that's what's occurring. And I think it gets a lot harder to justify them when we're saying that clearly.
Thank you for that. And so, look, as we wrap, can you just talk about kind of the same question I'll ask Miss Cathy? If you could just like wave a magic wand and have the power to create, housing justice, what would that look like for like the city of Pittsburgh or just like in general?
Yeah, I love that question. Wish that I could. But I think really, the right to housing. And again, thanks for taking the time to. I don't know if you can tell that I am tired. It has been a long, couple weeks, but this is so important, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to talk about this. Is that housing as a human right is so interdependent with pretty much any other human right that you can think of, and is necessary for us to have healthy communities, stable societies. We need people to have safe and stable housing in order for people to go to work, in order for people to go to school, in order for people to take care of their families and their children, and to access medical care. So it's really just my vision is a city that is livable for everyone, that has opportunities for everyone, and where rights are not contingent on your income or the color of your skin or your gender identity, or your immigration status. Really, we're trying to build, a human rights city that is livable for everyone, and I think we'll all be better off for that. And although that can sound idealistic, there's so much we can do in that direction, because we've been headed in the complete opposite direction for so long that actually, there's a lot we can do to realize that vision, even though I don't have a magic wand.
And you said, I know that was my last question, but you said that there's a lot we could do. You have a couple of things that you're working on. You need people to come out to, the county council next. Can you just let people know about what that action is and how they can get involved?
Yeah, so we don't have a date yet
Okay.
for the next city council, vote around the housing needs assessment package. But certainly, if folks, follow us on social media, and I'll, be happy to provide our email. We're happy to keep people up to date on that, campaign. And we have, other campaigns as well that I know we can't, get into all of that tonight, but if folks want to join the housing justice table as an individual or an organization, I'm always happy to talk more about the campaigns that we have or ideas for new campaigns, and get folks plugged into actions. So yeah, folks can email Pittsburgh Housing Justice Table at gmail.com, and I'll be happy to provide more information.
All right, well, Maddie, I thank you so much. I know there was, a housing workshop earlier, and people on the north side are doing
There's a lot
some
going on.
housing things today. So it's been a very busy day for you. So I really want to thank you all. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Yeah, thanks so much, Miracle. Take care.
Of course. Please go get some rest. And that has been Maddie with the Housing Justice Table. Again, there's so much happening here in the city of Pittsburgh. There are ways to get organized and plugged in. And I am going to, my apologies, we did not pull it up, But the housing justice table is actually with Take Action Mon Valley going to be having a housing town hall. Let me get the correct date on a Tuesday, September 23rd. Next Tuesday, they're going to have a housing justice town hall for people in the Mon Valley area. So next Tuesday from 5 to 7. So there's going to be a lot of organizing like happening that is going on. And in addition to that, there is, a renters town hall that's happening and trainings going on. And so just please make sure that you follow Pittsburgh United, that you're following One PA, because they are doing a lot of the training on the groundwork. There is eviction protection trainings that are also happening, because we understand that we are really in a full-blown recession. And so there are people who are trying to do the work to make sure that people are able to like stay home, access housing. There's also still from last week, the 500 for 500, where people are still trying to take people who are experiencing homelessness and getting folks housed. And so there's a lot of work that's really being done here in the city and the county as people are really trying to think of creative, innovative ways to really help folks. And so there's a lot happening. Amidst all of that, today is National Voter Registration Day. So if you have not yet, please make sure you are registered to vote. If you are 18 years old, or going to be 18 by November 4th. If you are a U.S. citizen, if you've lived in Pennsylvania for 30 days, please make sure you are registered to vote. The voter registration deadline is October 20th. We know here in Pennsylvania, it's going to be so important that people turn out to vote. We're telling people look at the bottom of the ballot and go backwards, because you will find out that there are retention races for our Supreme Court. Our Supreme Court is our last line of defense. Because of our Supreme Court, we have been able to fight for democracy, have access at the ballot box, have access to healthcare, access to fully funded schools, being able to have First Amendment rights, creative expression as artists. So it's really, really important that we are doing everything we can to make sure that we are able to keep our Supreme Court judges, our Superior Court judges. And so we'll have more on that in a future episode. But we also have some other events. As you know, we've talked about the Cadby Caravan like all last month. And guess what, y'all? The Cadby Caravan is almost here. It is going to be this Sunday, September 21st. We want to make sure that you stop by. We are doing the launch. It is going to be such a great day of community coming together. Remember, we're powering up with the Cadby Caravan Sunday, September 21st from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. There's going to be food. There's going to be film. It's going to be at the Pittsburgh Foundation's downtown office, 912 Fort Duquesne Boulevard on the 10th floor. There's, I got a peek at the schedule. It's going to be an amazing, amazing time to have community and conversation and think about what justice looks like. So please make sure you're able to come out on September 21st for the Power Up Caravan kickoff with Cadby. In addition, last week we had Manny from CRIP talking about the work that they're doing for the housing justice and helping people who are displaced. And so this Friday, please come out to the Ruggers Pub. It is going to be from 7 to 10 p.m. So it's a late evening, but on Friday, please come out for the CRIP fundraiser. There's going to be some very interesting things being raffled and auctioned off. So please make sure you show up this Friday. Again, register to vote, talk to folks. And we want to just wrap and understand that we know that a lot of people have been having conversations about violence and free speech over the past week. And we understand that these are unprecedented times for so many of our community members. The people are actually afraid, right? People are actually fearful of what the coming days and weeks and months look like. And so we at the One Hood Power, not One Power Hour, but just at One Hood Power, we always have put out calls to reject violence and calls to make sure that we protect life, that we invest in life, that we have policies that allow people to live full lives, right to housing, right to shelter, student loan debt, criminal justice reform, Medicare for all, living wages. We advocate because we understand that for a lot of us, politics has been violence. For a lot of us, political violence is police coming and tearing up our neighborhoods, occupying our neighborhoods and putting our loved ones in jails and prisons. For a lot of us, political violence is evictions and being people watching our loved ones being pushed out and priced out, watching people be disparaged, watching our government call people terrorists because of their faith and their identity, having racial profiling. And so we've always rejected political violence, and we've tried to create a home where people can have debate and disagreements and engagement, but also at the end of the day, fight for life. And that is what we are doing. And that is what we will continue to do. So we want people to feel safe. We want people to feel, comfortable making comments and statements on our social media, on our Facebook, on our Instagram. We try to have conversations. We always extend invites to people across the political spectrum. Sometimes they come on the show and sometimes they do not. But we always extend invites to Republicans, to Democrats, to Greens, to Independents, people from the Working Families Party, to people from, all of the parties. We try to invite people on to have conversation because we do believe in dialogue and we do believe in the importance of dialogue. What we do not do is disrespect people, and we do not allow folks to come onto the platform to disrespect or disparage people. And that has been like the only thing that we have really held fast on. And so we again ask people as they have, debate passionately, have conversations, but at the end of the day, understand that we are all in this society together. We're all in this neighborhood together, and we're all going to have to work together to make sure that we all have everything that we need to live and thrive. And so as we reject violence, we also need to make sure that we are fighting for our lives, fighting for our queer community, our trans community, our Muslim community, our Palestinian community, our disabled community, particularly our Black community. It's also September, which is National Suicide Awareness Month. And we know that so many of our Black men and boys have been struggling with suicide. They are the fastest growing segment of the population that is encountering and battling suicide. So it's also very important that we make sure that our communities have the resources that they need to address the issues that are facing them. And so we want to thank City Council for voting to unanimously approve the Stop the Violence Fund. We want to thank the Office of the Mayor, Ed Gainey in the City of Pittsburgh, and Council President Daniel Lavelle for pushing to make sure we have a Stop the Violence Fund, because we need to make sure that we have our budget showcase our values. And as we try to fight to have zero gun violence deaths in the city of Pittsburgh, we want to make sure that people have the opportunities and the support and resource they need to live and thrive. So again, I want to thank you all so much for tuning into this episode of the One Hood Power Hour. We're going to continue to have conversations. We're going to continue to dialogue. And next week, we'll have more conversations around housing and what does housing mean? What is housing justice? And what can we continue to do to fight for, to advocate for, to have better housing situations here in the city of Pittsburgh. So we're going to have some more conversations as we move to our November 4th election. Remember to take care of yourself, take care of each other. This has been the One Hood Power Hour with people who want to talk about issues that are important to you, for the news who matters, people who care. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week, same time at 7 p.m.